And so if we take the time to create that vision and make it a realistic vision, make it the vision that really is the one that will sustain us over time and make us productive and have a future, then that shows us what it is we need to do now to be able to put that in place. There's one other thing that we have to acknowledge as we're thinking about how to take advantage of the opportunity, and that is that we just have to admit it, that we have become a nation in which where you live has become the proxy for opportunity. Where you live. That where you live, your zip code, your address, determines whether or not your children will get to go to a good school or whether they will go to a failing school. Where you live determines whether or not you're going to live near employment, whether you're going to live in a community that is itself a natural job network, whether you're going to live near transportation, it's going to get you to jobs wherever they may be throughout the region. Where you live determines that. Where you live determines whether or not the property that you own, if you happen to own property, has a value that allows you to extract money from it in an emergency, in a health crisis, or to send a child to college, or to start an entrepreneurial venture. Some people live in homes that never worth any more than what they paid for it. Sometimes it goes down. Other people have a different experience. Your address determines that. And where you live even determines how long you will live and the quality of your well-being while you are alive. There was a study done in the Bay Area looking at this relationship between address and longevity. And what came out of the study is that if you lived in the affluent area of the Berkeley Hills, you had up to a 10-year longer life expectancy than if you lived in the low-income area of the Oakland Flatlands. It's been documented. How you'll live, though, is something that hasn't been as well documented, and we're starting to do that. That you know, if you go to the doctor and you're having some issues, the doctor's likely to say, well, you need to eat a better diet and you need to get exercise. For some people, it's easy to just take that in and go out and do it. For others, it's much more difficult. Where you live determines whether or not there are any fresh fruits and vegetables in your neighborhood. There's many people who live in communities where you cannot find a tomato, but where a young person could find a gun. Isn't that horrible to think of, that there are communities in this nation in which it's easier to find a gun than a tomato? That has to do with address. Don't have any farmers markets, none of that. That's one of the reasons that I've always been a fan and a storyteller about what's happened here, because the community said we're going to do something about that. People can't go out and get exercise. The Trust for Public Lands has documented that the parks, if they exist in low-income communities of color, are likely to be dangerous, unsupervised, and unsafe, and littered, if they exist at all. And too often the streets in our neighborhoods are not places where children can go out and get exercise. Parents say when they leave in the morning, come home from school, go in, lock the door, and do not leave. And so this notion of where you live determining opportunity is something that we can do something about. Every community should be a community of opportunity. And so we have a chance to start moving in that direction through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. What we have done as a nation is that we have acted decisively, and we've acted in a huge way. We have nearly $1 trillion going out to communities all across the country to respond to what has happened in terms of financial disaster. Some of what is happening is just exactly what you think would need to happen, and that is that we need to make sure that the people who are most vulnerable are protected, that they don't fall through the floor, that we create a ceiling. And so it's only right that we have used the resources to expand unemployment insurance, to expand food stamps, to make sure that we're treating people with dignity. We've done another thing, though, that's really smart, and that is that people who go to work on a regular basis should not live below the poverty level. And so expanding the Earned Income Tax Credit, expanding child care assistance, and other things like that have been just wonderful for the fairness part of the equation. But we also understand that one of the ways that we really can stimulate the economy is to start rebuilding the nation. Invest in the crumbling and neglected infrastructure. And so we have, yes, and so we have finally, we have resources moving in that direction. PolicyLink certainly didn't anticipate what happened in terms of this economic collapse, but we did anticipate that the nation was going to have to invest in its infrastructure. Because we recognized, as we were thinking about equity and inclusion, a couple of things. That a lot of people who are being left behind in this country are left behind because the places where they live aren't ready to compete in the economy. People who live in rural communities without access to broadband. People who live in communities where the roads and bridges have been crumbling, where the buses have not been invested in forever. So we recognized that infrastructure had to be addressed, and so we launched at the summit that you just heard about, the PolicyLink Center for Infrastructure Equity. And we found that it was just so timely that we had been thinking about this when all this infrastructure money starts to flow into our communities. Because what we are prepared to do is to help people all around the nation think about how to use these resources in a way that builds this fully inclusive society that we're talking about. How to focus on the places, the projects, and the people that will really allow us to make sure that everybody can participate and everybody can prosper. And I wanted to spend the remaining time talking to you about that because I think everybody in America has to be an advocate for making sure that we use this moment to get everybody participating so that everybody. And so when people ask you, what should we be doing with the resources that are flowing into our communities, one of the things we need to do is strengthen our cities. We must strengthen our cities because the cities really are the lifeblood of the region. And so many regions are starting to fail because we have disinvested for so long in our cities. And so when you think about how to put the investments, let's fix it first in the built environment before we start building more roads out into areas that have not been contributing to the well-being of the whole. So fix it first and strengthen our cities.